Thank you.
Okay. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Dot Goldberger from the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women here in Philadelphia. And along with Cindine Pizzell, we will be your hosts for today's webinar. Although you may see Sue Osthoff's picture up at the top and her name in the chat box, I will be your resident Sue Osthoff today, though I could never fill her shoes. So before we begin the presentation, I'll go over some logistics for today's webinar as quickly as I can so we can get to our wonderful speakers promptly. If you're disconnected from the webinar at any time, just go back to the original email that you got this morning and click on the link again to log back in. If you have any problems getting back on, please call iLink support at 800-799-4510. One of our assistants today for today's webinar, Katita Cavero, she just put that in the chat box. Thank you, Katita. So again, if you are having any technical difficulties, please reach iLink support at that number. You can find the chat box at the lower left-hand corner of your screen. To use it, just put your cursor in the white rectangle at the bottom, click in there, enter your text, and then hit the Enter key on your keyboard to submit. I've already seen that some people have been using it, so thanks for letting us know that it's working. So why don't we all go ahead and try out the public chat for those of you who haven't tried yet. Could everyone please just let us know where you're joining us from today and how many people are at your site if you're joining as a group. Just go to the lower left-hand corner and enter that information in the chat box now and hit enter when you're done. Great, thank you. Thank you for all of that. Great, we have some people joining as a group. All over the country, fantastic. Okay. So all participants should be muted, but I'm not actually sure if that is truly working. So just please use the chat feature for any questions. And like I said before, please just only the presenters and Cindine speak on the line. So use the chat feature for any questions, problems, or comments you may have. We'll collect questions during the webinar, and time allowing, we'll pose as many as we can to the presenter at the end of the presentation. If you are joining us by phone only, please email me with any questions at my email address, dot, that's dot like a polka dot, dot at ncdbw.org. And Katita just put that in the chat box as well. Thank you again, Katita. If you emailed Sue Osthoff's email address at any time today, we won't be receiving the message. She's away from the office. So again, if you have any questions, please email me at dot at ncdbw.org. We are recording this webinar today, so you will be able to access this on our website, www.ncdbw, in about a week. We have posted today's PowerPoint, which you can save and or print bios of today's presenters on Google Drive. The link was in our reminder note that you got this morning, right where you got the join link. And Katita just put it in the chat box again. So thanks again, Katita. If you're signed into iLink, you don't need to get the PowerPoint from Google Drive now. We'll show it on your screen. You can see page 1 right on your screen right now. Also, I will send an email shortly after the completion of the webinar. It will contain a brief confirmation of your attendance, a link to your posted recordings, and a very brief survey. The same evaluation will also pop up at the end of the webinar in case you would prefer to answer it immediately following the webinar. We would greatly appreciate it if you'd fill out the survey. Your feedback is extremely helpful to us and to the presenters. So right now we have 4 questions for you all, and it would be great to hear from all of you if possible. It's very helpful to know who is on the call. So here we have some polling questions. please answer the questions by clicking on the dots that appear on your screen and not in the chat box. But for one of the questions, if you answer other on question 1 or question 4, please check other and then go to the chat box and fill in your answer there. Thank you in advance for all your answers and for your patience. Okay, you should be seeing the polling questions up now. And while that's going on, I am going to try and mute the chimes again. Okay. So is everybody answering those questions? If you answered other on question 1 or question 4, please answer with your name, with the name of the program or the name of the grant in the chat box now. Okay, some answers still coming in, and
that's the only those are OVW
I will now. All right, I will share the results. So you can see we've got a bunch of community-based advocates. We've got some clinicians, social workers, therapists, and great. So thanks again for answering. I really appreciate it. So the questions again for those of you who are on the phone are: how do you describe your profession? Community-based advocate, coalition staff, national technical assistance provider, attorney, clinician, social worker, therapist, researcher, and a professor, and other. The second, have you ever participated as an expert witness in a case involving domestic violence, sexual assault, or other types of trauma? Are you an OVW grantee? And if you are an OVW grantee, please specify your grant program. And again, answers in the chat box. Thank you. For those of you participating only on the telephone today, you can email your answers to me. My email address again, and if Katita, if you could put it in the chat box, my email address is dot.ncdbw.org. And thanks, Katita. So those of you who are signed into iLink, you can see all the answers of who is there. Okay, so great. Thanks so much for letting us know a bit about who's participating today. Now I would like to turn the webinar over to our legal coordinator, Cindine Pizzell. She will introduce our speakers today.
Thank you, Dot. And thank you everybody for joining us here today. This is the 10th webinar in our series about expert witnesses in cases that involve survivors of battering, sexual assault, and other forms of trauma. If you missed any of the earlier webinars in the series, then we do have some recordings that are available on our website. You can pull those up and listen to them, and they're posted at ncdbw.org. You just click on the resource tab once you get to the website, and we can put that in the chat box for you. We are experiencing a couple technical difficulties trying to get all the participants muted, but hopefully we'll be able to get that accomplished soon. But just so you know, as Dot said earlier, we will collect questions from you from the chat box, and at the end of the webinar, we will ask as many to our presenters as we can. Before we begin, I want to make sure to thank the Office on Violence Against Women for the support of this project on expert witnesses. We just think it is great that they are supporting our work here at the Clearinghouse and work around the country about expert witnessing. As you know, today we're going to hear from two very experienced expert witnesses, and it is my great pleasure to introduce both of them. Both have been doing this work for a long period of time, and I have had the pleasure of working with them and getting to know them, both through the work of the National Clearinghouse and through expert witness trainings they have given through the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence. I have had the privilege of attending several of those trainings, and so I can say based on my first-hand experience, that you're going to learn a lot from what you hear today. So to introduce our presenters, I'll start with Shelby Moore. She's a tenured professor of law at South Texas College of Law in Houston, Texas. She is an award-winning, widely published teacher and scholar and an expert in domestic violence issues. She's testified in many cases, including some very high-profile cases. Prior to entering academia, she practiced as a litigator in Maryland. She also served as an attorney in a civil rights firm and has practiced as a prosecutor in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, and we are so pleased that she could join us here today. Presenting with her will be Toby Myers, who has been active in numerous organizations to end violence against women. She helped to start the first battered women's shelter in Houston, Texas, and she helped to start Texas's statewide domestic violence coalition, and she founded and for many years directed a battering intervention program. Toby's a licensed professional counselor and a licensed clinical social worker and has served on numerous boards, steering committees, advisory boards, and editorial boards. She's in her 4th decade in this field, and her current domestic violence-related activities include working with attorneys, usually as an expert. She also runs a limited counseling practice. She serves on numerous boards and committees, and she conducts training and provides technical assistance. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into this webinar. Okay. So I'm going to do some moderating here because we have some really specific questions that we want to present to these two very experienced experts. And so the first one is for both of you. How did you get started with doing expert testimony?
This is Toby, and I'm going first. And actually, one of the organizations that I belong to was the National Council of Jewish Women, and we started an organization called Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse. And some of the women who helped birth this organization were attorneys, and one of them called me when she had a case about a battered woman who had stabbed her husband to death. And that was the first time I was ever involved in a case like that. It was 1980. Okay. I did not know what I was doing. I had never done anything like that. I had worked with the attorney and the woman, and we prepared, but the case settled out of court, much to my relief.
I really began wanting to be an expert when I was a prosecutor because the cases I handled, I felt uncomfortable as a prosecutor prosecuting women who had been accused of killing an abuser after they had been abused for a long period of time. And I tried one of the first cases under the battered woman syndrome statute in Maryland. And by the time I got to Houston in 1992 and then met Toby in 1994, the very first case I did was one out of Dallas, Texas, where a woman was shot, but not killed, but seriously injured when her husband tracked her down to work and shot her and really left her in a vegetative state.
Is there any, I know that you probably both got involved in cases before you actually took the stand in any, but fast forward to the time that you actually testified. Is there anything that you wish you would have known before you got on that chair for the first time?
Well, obviously the answer is yes, and you refine how you prepare a case the more you do them. And so, one time I went to a case and hadn't even met with the attorney. They just called me and I ran down there. That's a no-no, and I would never do that again.
I think that I would want to know how it feels to be on the cross-examination side, because I was a prosecutor before, and I was always the one doing the cross-examination. I was comfortable with that, but I definitely wasn't comfortable with somebody cross-examining me the way it can occur if the prosecutor or defense attorney, whomever it might be, is coming after you for your expertise or because of your expertise.
Shelby, do you think that because you had been a cross-examiner in the past. Do you think that helped you or hurt you in terms of serving as a witness?
I think it helped to some degree, but perhaps I was a little overly confident about how I would actually feel when sitting in the witness stand. I felt that the pressure that I probably put on other people, I definitely experienced it, but I think I came out of it more quickly after realizing it wasn't so bad and I had done it before, and you just have to answer the questions that you're being given.
Well, that makes sense. Shelby, if you that case that you mentioned doing, if you were working on that same case today, is there anything that you would do differently?
I think I come in as an academic expert, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. And so I think I would temper how I speak to the jury. I would still give the same information, but I would be more thoughtful about the information that I'm giving, the statistics that I'm giving, so that they're not overwhelmed by it. It's nice to know that you know something, but the jury has to be able to access what you're saying and understand it.
And Toby, I know that first case you talked about didn't actually go to trial, and I know that you mentioned you always want to make sure that you have some time to spend with attorneys before. But other than that, is there anything you would do differently today if you worked on that case?
Well, one of the things I learned, too, is that you have to be able to tell a story and somehow make a relation with the jury so they understand what's going on with that case and humanize the case. And actually, one time down in Edinburgh, Texas, the prosecutor jumped in, she was the opposing counsel, and said, "Stop her, she's testifying for the defendant."
Were you supposed to be testifying for the defendant?
Well, I was testifying in her own words and with her own emotion. I was almost putting on a play.
Toby, can you talk a little bit, I mean, you've been involved in anti-domestic violence work for a long time. Can you talk about how your different professional experiences have contributed to your work as an expert?
Yes, I can. And for many years, I worked in the research and training arm of our State Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation. And that was the bright, shining star in the department. And so obviously having the academic credentials and the credentials that were vetted by the state were very, very helpful to me. And then also when being in this movement or being in this work from the time it started really gives me a wonderful historical perspective, and it seems to garner some respect among people in front of whom I testify.
Shelby, what do you think of the ways that you coming into this as an attorney has kind of shaped the way that you perform your expert function?
I think having the legal background has been really helpful, because I don't know that I would have had it on my radar if I weren't a prosecutor. And the first case I ever had to handle was a 15-year-old juvenile male who had beaten his pregnant girlfriend, who was 18, so badly that he bloodied her, and she ended up in the hospital. And then I saw the father come in and slam the door on his wife, and even the judge commented, "I can see why your son has this abuse issue," and the father exploded in the courtroom. And then, as I said earlier, I got to try one of the first cases using the battered woman syndrome statute in Maryland, but it informed me in a way that I didn't expect, because I was unhappy with the statute. I was unhappy prosecuting the woman, and so I realized that I wanted to get an advanced law degree so that I could actually turn my own table and actually be an advocate for for women who are victims of domestic violence rather than prosecuting them. I was not very comfortable with that.
And Shelby, I have a follow-up question. When you are hired to work on a case, do you find that your background as a litigator, do you ever butt heads at all with the attorneys who who call you as an expert, or like what if your ideas about strategy and that kind of thing are different than theirs?
I haven't butted heads with anybody in that way, because when I've come into it, they've actually been respectful of my background, and they actually know why they're calling me, because I'm sure Toby doesn't make phone calls with regard to it, and I never do. And so when people call me, they already know what my background is. They've already done a little bit of research, or somebody's made a referral. And so I think they're pretty respectful of what I have to say, and they simply I simply try to make it work in the context of the case that I'm in. And if I don't think I can serve as an expert, I tell them that too.
Uh-huh.
And Cindy, I wanted to mention something about battered women syndrome, as Shelby brought it up, and it was in the legislature in Maryland and several other states. Missouri was one of them. And I remember Sue Oscoff saying to us in Texas one time, "Y'all are so smart, you never use that." And it wasn't because we were so smart in Texas as we were changing legislation. It was because things had a tendency to begin on each seaboard, like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and then Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and L.A., and then drift mid-continent, but mid-continent north, like Detroit and Chicago. And then finally, when we got them, we could see all the mistakes that had been made, and we had never used it.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I know that I originally said that we were going to save some questions for the end, but I think it makes sense to ask this one now. Stephanie writes, have you ever had any issues being qualified as an expert? And since Stephanie wrote that while Shelby was talking, I'm wondering if that question is because you don't have a clinical background or a therapy background, but a legal background. And so has that ever been a barrier for you, Shelby?
No, actually it hasn't. Not ever. And in fact, I think that's how I would say the attorney asked me such.
Okay, Shelby, I'm sorry, we're having some weird background noise right now. I'm going to ask you if you could speak up, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I've never had a problem being qualified as an expert because I will have read the law reviews and the articles and whatever science has come out or the statistics. And if they're trying to, if they sort of attack that, which sometimes they do, but not in any really voracious way, then I typically am accepted as an expert on domestic violence in domestic violence issues.
Shelby, how about you? I mean, I know you have a lot of different ways in which you're qualified to testify as an expert, but has anybody ever taken you on about having the wrong kind of background?
I was taken on initially when I was first doing testimony. It was much harder. It seemed like it was like getting the first pickle out of the jar. You pull and tug and can't get it out, and then when the first one comes out, it was much easier.
Uh-huh.
Okay, what does that mean?
So the very first time that I had the pleasure of hearing Toby and Shelby present, they talked about some cases that they've worked together. And so I'm hoping that Toby and Shelby can talk a little bit to all of us about a case in which both of you have testified. And for everybody who's not muted right now, can you please dial *6 to mute yourself, because we're hearing some wacky stuff in the background.
Okay. Toby and I testified in a case not too long ago where we were both experts in the case, and I began working on the case as soon as the woman was convicted, because I was actually tangentially called as an expert, or I was told I might be called as an expert for the woman who had killed her abuser. But I was never called, and the expert that they used really got beaten up a bit on the stand, and they didn't call me because of money issues, I believe, which I would have done it pro bono had they asked me. But in that case, since she did lose, I came in at the appellate level with another attorney, and Toby came in as well, based on receiving a call from the same attorney.
No, I came in because of the National Clearinghouse. The attorney had called Jill Spector, and I did that pro bono mainly as a favor to the clearinghouse.
Thanks, Toby. Can you talk about why that particular legal strategy involved more than one expert witness?
I think that the attorneys had two goals. I think that both of us have different expertise that we bring to the table. The academic background brings the statistics and the literature in the field and things of that nature. And so I think they wanted an academic expert that would talk about that and could answer the questions that came up, in addition to some of the stereotype questions that they were asking about why people think that battered women should leave. And so I had to answer those questions, and then to use some of the and to provide to the jury some of the academic aspects, like the statistics on domestic violence and like some of the literature on domestic violence and the like.
And this is Toby speaking. And in that particular case, I did not interview the woman because she had been in prison some time. I read all the transcript and read many, many supporting documents, and the transcript was way over 1,000 pages. And the prosecutor made a big thing about why I hadn't done that, and was that my usual practice? And I will answer, no, that is not my usual practice. And the reason that I had not done it, which he never asked me, was because I was afraid that they would say, oh, she's been lingering in prison all these years, and she's thought up a much better story, and she could change it. And so I figured I would just use the data that were there during the first trial.
And actually, this is Shelby again, I actually wrote a confidential report for that case before I ever testified in it, looking at the transcripts that Toby had, and there were lots of pages of transcripts. But we both had to look at them in order to really prepare for the case. But then in writing the report, it was trying to give some basis for why the verdict should be overturned, or at least the sentencing should be overturned. So at least they had a 12 or 15-page report. I think it was something like that would at least give guidance to the court. The court's not going to go back and look at all the transcripts and all of that, but the report actually helped the attorney in many ways.
And both of us submitted reports, and the reports were gone over with a fine-tooth comb because Harris County, the county in which Houston is, has its own domestic violence experts.
That's right.
Shelby, in light of your background as an attorney and as an academic, can you talk a little bit about how you structured your report? Like psychologists will tend to write documents that look like psych evaluations. How do you think, as an attorney, yours was different than another might have looked?
Well,
before we begin, do you mind if I just try muting everybody again, and then I'm going to, again, Shelby and Toby and Suzanne, ask you to unmute yourself?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Let's
try again.
Well, what day does it end? Isn't it today?
Muted.
Okay, so try unmuting yourselves now.
Okay. My report was definitely full of case law and law reviews, and the reason it's different from a psychiatrist report or something like that is because it started with a legal issue or a legal premise that was presented to me by the attorney, and then I used the transcript, and I used case law, and I used law reviews to actually bolster the position that I was taking about why she needed to have had an expert in domestic violence. And so I use, I don't think a lot of times people are going to be using case law, or they're going to be using law reviews or those kind of statistics, but that's what I did in the last couple of cases that I've done, even before I've ever been asked to testify. That's what I've done. I've given reports that look like, that include law reviews, that include case law, and that they go directly to the issue that's being asked. And there were several issues presented, so each part of the report addressed that issue with the same format of law reviews, case law, and the like.
Toby,
And this is Toby. And in my report, I went through the transcript and all the affidavits of other people and was able to document the abuse of her husband, how she had tried to leave and was foiled in her attempts to leave and gone back, and how and how it was just there was no other way, and that how she had even tried to talk him down during the actual killing.
Yeah.
So the reports came in from very different angles. And were you able to watch each other testify?
I was able to watch Shelby, and it was bravo, and it was the most wonderful. Sometimes you have a transformative moment, and the prosecutor was coming at her because she had gone to Harvard, and what he was trying to prove was that this is an uppity black woman, and she didn't miss a beat. And when she came back, she said, "No, I wasn't proud of going to Harvard, not nearly as proud as I was of my niece who went to Yale."
I'm sorry, I'm almost laughing again. But I watched Toby, and Toby watched me. And sometimes when it was getting, in the first trial where we testified, especially, we were able to watch each other. And sometimes just a smile from her from the corner made it okay. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but when she would smile from the corner, it was almost an affirmation. You're doing okay. You're doing okay. And if she weren't in the room, I guess I wouldn't have looked for the affirmation, but because she was there and I could see her fixed in the courtroom, the way she was, it was very helpful for me because I could see her and I could see it was okay. No matter what they were asking me, it was okay.
Sounds like it's really
And
helpful to have.
that's a tip. If you ever watch anyone testify whom you like and want to support, you have to sit there and act as though that person is casting pearls before swine. Then if you have a criticism, when you're back alone with them, you can give it to them so they can sharpen up for the next time. But while you're there, you have this beatific look on your face as though you're transfixed.
Yeah, and I want to say something about what I learned about Toby. Toby, even if she said she was nervous, she really controlled the prosecutor